This video is going to be a little spicy. Hey, YouTube overlords, just as a heads up. All right, this is for educational purposes only. Nobody gets hurt in this video. This is all training. Now, there's no other way to say this, so let's just jump right in onto this bad boy. A Florida officer completely mag-dumped into his own patrol car after he heard what he thought was a gunshot. And it wasn't. It ended up just being an acorn falling on top of his car. So yes, an officer mag-dumped into his own patrol car with somebody in it after he heard an acorn hit the hood. Not a good look. You heard me right. Florida man is evolving. He's evolving into Florida cop, and I'm really scared as to what could potentially happen with Florida cop. But at the same time, the anarchist in me is really excited to see what could happen with the new headlines Florida cop does, etc. Florida cop saves child from being eaten by an alligator at alligator farm by tasing alligator 30 times. That's actually a positive Florida cop story. The bad ones would have to do with meth. Gosh, but I'd still like to see those headlines. You know what I don't want to see, though? Your personal information on the internet. That's why this video's sponsor is Aura. Have you ever Googled yourself? Well, there's companies out there called data brokers that collect all that juicy little tidbits of information and they sell it to scammers, hackers, governments. That's right, the government is tracking you and seeing where you go to, which sites you use, which is why I started using Aura, today's sponsor. Now, cleaning up all my information does reduce the amount of spam that I get, but it also protects me from hackers using this type of information in order to get into my social media accounts, bank accounts, or other sensitive information. With Aura, you also get credit monitoring, antivirus, VPN, password management, parental controls, identity theft monitoring, and insurance all in one single affordable app. That's easy. You might say, but AC, I've already got a VPN. Yeah, but do you have all of it? What's the point of locking the front door if your garage is wide open? Have all the tools. That way you can have your privacy and protect it like I value mine. Just check out aura.com/angrycops. Click the link below and get your free 2-week trial. See the advantages for yourself. But let's get back to the video. I'm going to give you everything that actually happened, why they were there, the in-between, the after effects, and a little bit of backstory on the officer right now. Let's get the full picture. 2 Florida deputies, the Quick Draw McGraw guy and his sergeant, were reporting to a domestic incident. A young lady was having a tough time with her boyfriend. He stole her car, was making threatening messages to her, and she was in fear for her safety. Well, the officers ended up catching him and putting him in the back of their vehicle in handcuffs. And while talking to the young woman, they discovered that there were some photos sent to her from the jerky boyfriend. One of these photos looked like the bad boyfriend had the end of a suppressor sticking out. The end of a suppressor for potentially a pistol. So, our deputy decides to go back to the car and do a more thorough search of the individual to make sure that he didn't sneak some sort of weapon on him in the back of the patrol car. That's when it went nuts. An acorn drops from the tree above and hits the top of the patrol vehicle, sending the deputy into fight or flight mode. Thinking that the bad boyfriend inside of the police vehicle did have a suppressed weapon on him and just fired a round off at him, the deputy then continues to barrel roll a couple of times, screaming that he's been hit, and then mag dumping into his own patrol vehicle, thinking that he was being shot at.
Anyway, I started blasting. Bang! Bang! Well, I don't see so good, so I missed.
Now, for those of you that aren't super cool firearms nerds out there, a suppressor can seriously limit the amount of decibels, the loudness, of a round being fired. However, a cold suppressor shot is much louder than a hot suppressor shot. So, yes, does it limit the amount of sound that comes out? Of course it does. That's what a suppressor does. But if a dude sitting in the back of a patrol car hasn't fired that weapon off in a while, the suppressor is cold. If they fire that, it's gonna sound fairly loud. Not normal gunshot loud, but like ears ringing, what was that? Not, you follow me? A significant pow, not a, I'm sure Goran Thumb and Demolition Ranch have done a video on it. Now, unfortunately, after the acorn heard round the world, the officer does his barrel rolls, empties the mag dumps, but also says that he's shot, which he is not.
I'm hit! I was shot through the car!
And in the officer's own words, after describing the incident, after he heard the, he felt his legs go out and thought that he was shot. But once again, he was not. Now, all of these actions, the barrel rolls, the screaming, "I'm shot," the shots fired, the mag dumping into his own patrol vehicle, all this from the combat constable, sends some signals to the sergeant that's there with the female victim of this entire incident. And she sees it going on and rightfully so thinks, "Oh my God, my officer's being shot at by the guy from inside the vehicle." And she licks off a couple rounds. Now, seriously, what would you do if your friend's laying on the ground screaming he's shot and licking off rounds?
What?
You'd be like, "Oh wow, this guy's pretty serious. I think that he was definitely shot by the way he's acting. I should react appropriately." Now, the most insane thing about this story, I feel, is that with the amount of rounds fired and number of acorns fallen, nobody was shot. The officer wasn't shot, we know that already, but neither was the defendant inside of the vehicle that was being detained and possibly arrested for the harassment of his girlfriend. Out of all the rounds fired at the vehicle with the dude in it handcuffed, nobody got hit. Which leads me to believe, and this is my weird trainer thought, right? Like, as a trainer, I'm looking at this and saying, how shitty were your shooting tactics if not even a single round hit your target? Well, I want to spend some more time on the range. Now, I'm a big supporter of having military veterans in police departments. Now, why? Obviously, you already trained with a firearm. You've got at least a decent amount of discipline to have gone through basic training, so you can listen to the hierarchy of your platoon sergeant and shift supervisor, sergeant, lieutenants, etc. And I'm a huge proponent of having combat veterans on the streets because guess what? In situations where there's a gunfight, some of these combat veterans already know how they would act. And that's a big question. Hey, new guy on the street, how would you react if somebody was shooting at you? I don't know. I've never been in that position, and I only get training once a year on it. Hey, combat veteran who spent years overseas and years doing the job that prepared him to deal with these combat scenarios, how would you deal with being shot at? Well, having been in Afghanistan or Iraq for a number of years and having been shot at and returning fire, I know how I would act in those scenarios. There's going to be some F-bombs going around, but I'm not going to just start screaming and falling on the ground yelling I'm shot when I'm not. Which is another huge twist in this weird, nutso, pun intended, story, is the deputy that lost his mind is a combat veteran. Now, could we attribute some of this to PTSD? Now, here's his background. 10 years as a special forces officer with 2 tours to Afghanistan. Now, this is the news. So I don't know if special forces officer means that he was in special forces and was an officer of an ODA team, or if he was just an officer attached to a special forces unit, which are 2 completely different things, and would explain a little bit better of why a special forces officer, soldier, would react in such a way that it would baffle me for a person with that amount of training. But in addition to those 2 tours in the Special Forces Service and an officer in the military, the officer states that he never saw combat during his 2 tours in Afghanistan, which is just, how does a Special Forces guy not see combat in Afghanistan after 2 years? It's got to be that he's an officer attached to a Special Forces unit, or if he was an officer in Special Forces, I would assume that he stayed on post half the time because maybe the guys saw him act like this and were like, no, this guy he can't go outside the wire with us. Absolutely not. Nope. Stay here, do a different job. You're not going to go do the kinetic stuff. And if he is SF, then that just kind of goes to show you how stressful the cop job is. Even an SF guy who's got all the training in the world for combat scenarios lost his fucking mind in the middle of a call when something that he thought happened didn't happen. How do you expect the normal officer who's just a cat off the streets with pistol training once or twice a year for a combination of 6 or 8 hours to react? So there you go. More training for cops, obviously, is something we should all be able to get behind. Now, what I think is 100% the right decision, the officer resigned, because this job is definitely not for him if he's got that much of a hair trigger. But me being my smart ass in this self, I couldn't help but make this.
Now you want to get nuts? Come on, let's get nuts.
And you can pick up this shirt and a whole bunch of other shirts at at angry-cops.com. I've got new Marine ones, Lance Corporal Underground. Some of you guys wanted a shirt, so I doodled one up. Yeah, there's a dead hooker in it. You're welcome. And I know you like crayons, so I made this one too. All right, angry-cops.com. All the links, all the stuff, all the merch. It even has a link to my live streaming, which I'll probably be talking about this later on this week. Okay, carry on.